Hi there, welcome to my channel. I just wanted to check in today with you all that actually listen to my videos and visit my channel, and just say hello and just give you a little update on what's been going on in my life. So it's been 6 months, a little bit more than 6 months since I got sick, and I got really sick with the COVID. And it's been 6 months plus a few days since I also quit the cannabis. And that had been a constant in my life for almost 20 years. And when I got sick, I found that I couldn't smoke. It didn't make me feel better, and it actually made me feel worse. And so I was sort of forced to quit. I just did a video about this a few months ago. And so I wanted to kind of update you. I'm still not using, and I don't have any plans to start using again. I figure I stopped, I might as well keep going with this, and something within me keeps me going and encourages me to leave it behind. There are things about it that I miss, sure, but my higher self keeps pushing me forward and telling me that it served its purpose in my life, and now is a new part of my life, and it's not going to be a part of my future. So it served me well during the time that I used it for like 20 years, and it was a very difficult process of withdrawal and getting off of it. I talked about that in my last video, and it's gotten easier. Things have gotten better. Much less depression, much less anxiety. I still dream all night, every night, which is bothersome to me, but that has gotten better too. Not so much in that I'm not dreaming, because I am, but the intensity of the dreams and just the newness of having such a busy dream life has gotten better, because as soon as I quit smoking, I immediately started dreaming, and that was after like 18, 20 years of barely dreaming, which isn't very healthy. That's not a good thing. I got really good sleep during those years, and I felt very well rested, but your subconscious needs to filter itself, and it does that through dreams. And I wasn't doing that for a long time, and then as soon as I quit, then the dreams started full force, and I wasn't used to it, and it was very difficult, very difficult. It caused depression, it caused anxiety, but over time that has gotten better and better. So if you're going through anything like that, just rest assured that it will pass, and things will get better, and you will normalize, and your brain chemistry will come back to a new normal, and you will start making the dopamine on your own, and your metabolism will even out, and you'll find yourself again. And the other thing I wanted to do today was talk about this book that I've been reading that has been really incredible. It's called The Invisible Rainbow, A History of Electricity and Life. And my friend Mark on here on YouTube recommended this when I did my video about COVID. And wow, this has been an eye-opening book. It's just been incredible to read the information, and it really has taught me about the history of electricity, how it has affected human health, and how it is directly related to many and most of the illnesses that we get, including the so-called COVID. And despite the fact that the news media would like for us to believe that there's some kind of a argument between where the COVID virus came from, did it happen organically, naturally, or did it come from a lab? It's neither. It's more than likely coming from 5G, from the implementation of 5G. They started pushing the 5G on us. They started implementing it in April of 2019, which is just about the time that COVID started happening. And if you read this book, you'll find that every pandemic that we have known since the 1860s has been directly related to the release and the implementation of new technology, new electricity in our lives, new electromagnetic frequencies, radio waves. And so I would just encourage you to read this book. It's a long book. It's full of history. There's some like technology stuff, electrical kind of stuff that's a little bit difficult to understand, but that's okay. I don't feel like I have to understand everything about electricity to benefit greatly from the information in this book. And I know that there's a globe Earth on the cover, and that's, there's still stuff to learn in here, even though the guy that wrote it doesn't realize that we don't live on a spinning globe Earth. But that's okay. We'll forgive him. So I wanted to just read to you a little bit from this book, just to kind of give you a taste of what it's about. So in the prologue, it says, first of all, it says, once upon a time, the rainbow visible in the sky after a storm represented all the colors there were. Our earth was designated that way, designed that way. We have a blanket of air above us that absorbs the higher ultraviolets, together with all of the X-rays and gamma rays from space. Most of the longer waves that we use today for radio communication were once absent as well. Or rather, they were there in infinitesimal amounts. They came to us from the sun and stars, but with energies that were 1 trillion times weaker than the light that also came from the heavens. So weak were the cosmic radio waves that they would have been invisible, and so life never developed organs that could see them. The even longer waves, the low-frequency pulsations given off by lightning, are also visible. When lightning flashes, it momentarily fills the air with them, but they are almost gone in an instant. Their echo, reverberating around the world, is roughly 10 billion times weaker than the light from the sun. We never evolved organs to see this either. But our bodies know that those colors are there. The energy of our cells whispering in the radio frequency range is infinitesimal, but necessary for life. Every thought, every movement that we make surrounds us with low-frequency pulsations, whispers that were first detected in 1875 and are also necessary for life. The electricity that we use today, the substance that we send through wires and broadcast through the air without a thought, was identified around 1700 as a property of life. Only later did scientists learn to extract it and make it move inanimate objects, ignoring, because they could not see, its effects on the living world. It surrounds us today in all of its colors at intensities that rival the light from the sun, but we still cannot see it because it was not present at life's birth. We live today with a number of devastating diseases that do not belong here, whose origin we do not know, whose presence we take for granted and no longer question. What it feels like to be without them is a state of vitality that we have completely forgotten. Anxiety disorder, afflicting 1/6 of humanity, did not exist before the 1860s, when telegraph wires first encircled the earth. Think about that. Anxiety disorder, afflicting 1/6 of us, did not exist before the 1860s, when telegraph wires first encircled the earth. No hint of it appears in the medical literature before 1866. Influenza, in its present form, was invented in 1889, along with alternating current. It is with us always, like a familiar guest, so familiar that we have forgotten that it wasn't always so. Many of the doctors who were flooded with the disease in 1889 had never seen a case before. Prior to the 1860s, diabetes was so rare that few doctors saw more than 1 or 2 cases during their lifetime. It, too, has changed its characters. Diabetics were once skeletally thin. Obese people never had this disease. Heart disease at that time was the 25th most common illness, heart disease, behind accidental drowning. It was an illness of infants and old people. It was extraordinary for anyone else to have a diseased heart. Cancer was also exceedingly rare. Even tobacco smoking in non-electrified times did not cause lung cancer. These are the diseases of civilization that we have also inflicted on our animal and plant neighbors, diseases that we live with because of a refusal to recognize the force that we have harnessed for what it is. The 60-cycle current in our house wiring, the ultrasonic frequencies in our computers, the radio waves in our televisions, the microwaves in our cell phones. These are only distortions of the invisible rainbow that runs through our veins and makes us alive. But we have forgotten. It is time to remember. So one of the things that really struck me in this book was in the chapter on chronic electrical illness, and that's chapter 5, where he talks about basically anxiety disorders, anxiety neurosis, as it used to be called, neurasthenia. Neurasthenia is what they used to call anxiety neurosis, and its crisis, anxiety attacks or panic attacks. And so Freud listed many of the symptoms of this neurosis, like irritability, heart palpitations, arrhythmias, which I've talked about. I've had arrhythmias before. Shortness of breath, asthma attacks, perspiration, tremors, ravenous hungers, diarrhea, vertigo, vasomotor disturbances like flushing and cold extremities, numbness and tingling, insomnia, nausea, vomiting, frequent urination, rheumatic pains, weakness, exhaustion. And it says that Freud ended the search for a physical cause for these symptoms of neurasthenia by reclassifying it as a mental disease. So what is now called chronic fatigue syndrome used to be called neurasthenia, and it was regarded as something physical, physically caused. Now, those things have been reclassified as mental disorders, and so it's in your mind. All of these things, all of these symptoms, often doctors will say is in your mind. So many people have experienced this when they go to doctors. When they can't find a cause, they'll say that it's psychosomatic, right? So these doctors at about this time, like Freud's time, basically signed the death warrant of neurasthenia and relegated it into mental health issues. So, let me continue reading here. So they took it out of like the medical books that classified diseases, physical diseases, and they reclassified it into the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Psychiatric Illnesses. And it says here, it was a death warrant only in North America and Western Europe, however, at this point. Half the world still uses neurasthenia as a diagnosis in the sense intended by the doctor who coined the term. His last name is Beard. In all of Asia, Eastern Europe, Russia, and the former Soviet republics, neurasthenia is today the most common of all psychiatric diagnoses, as well as one of the most frequently diagnosed diseases in general medical practice. It is often considered a sign of chronic toxicity. In the 1920s, just as the term was being abandoned in the West, it was first coming into use in China. The reason? China was just beginning to industrialize. The epidemic that had begun in Europe and America in the late 19th century had not yet reached China at that time. In Russia, which began to industrialize along with the rest of Europe, neurasthenia became epidemic, all of those symptoms that I listed, in the 1880s. But 19th century Russian medicine and psychology were heavily influenced by neurophysiologist Ivan Sechenov, who emphasized external stimuli and environmental factors in the workings of the mind and body. Because of Sechenov's influence and that of his pupil Ivan Pavlov, After him, the Russians rejected Freud's redefinition of neurasthenia as anxiety neurosis, and in the 20th century, Russian doctors found a number of environmental causes for neurasthenia. Prominent among them were electricity and electromagnetic radiation in their various forms. Radio wave sickness, they call it. So I don't want to suggest that there's no other reason for disease, because there obviously is reasons for disease. You know, our food has deteriorated. GMOs have increased insanely. Preservatives, terrible ingredients that should be illegal in the foods that we eat. Yes, all of those things are a factor in our physical health, but there's nothing that is more influential, and that's the original root word of influenza, is influence. And they called it that because in the old days, before electricity, when a person would come down with this ailment, they called it influence, because they believed that it was influenced by the sun, electricity. And so today, now that we've harnessed electricity and we use it in a way that is toxic to us, it is the cause of our illnesses. It is the cause of most of our problems as human beings, and not just us, but also the animals and the plant life in this world. So I don't, people may argue, well, there's other things involved too. Well, of course there's other things involved as we have modernized and implemented all of this technology into our lives. But without the technology, none of those other things would have happened either. So he says, as living beings, not only do we possess a mind and a body, but we also have nerves that join the two. Our nerves are not just conduits for the ebb and flow of electric fluid from the universe, as was once believed, nor are they just an elaborate messenger service to deliver chemicals to muscles, as is currently thought. Rather, as we will see, they are both. As a messenger service, the nervous system can be poisoned by toxic chemicals. As a network of fine transmission wires, it can easily be damaged or unbalanced by a great or unfamiliar electric load. This has effects on both mind and body that we know today of as anxiety disorder. So that's all I'm going to read to you from there. You can buy this online. I think it's a really good idea to read it. It's been profoundly educational for me. And I realize now that this whole COVID thing is about the implementation of 5G. Duh, we knew that there was some kind of a link between them. We knew that there was some kind of conspiracy there, and sure enough, there is. And it's all written in history. The timeline is there. The rollout of some kind of new electrical technology and a pandemic, one after another since like the 1860s. So anyway, thanks for listening. I hope that everybody's doing well. I'm doing well. Things are getting better and better, and I hope you're good. And I will talk to you soon. Thanks for listening.